Community-minded, locally focused. We're localwebradio.fm.
Do you enjoy a nice glass of wine? Do you want to know more about wine pairing or the process of how wine is made? Welcome to From the Vine to the Wine with wine expert and connoisseur, Matt Brzovic. Now, here's your host.
Hi, I'm your host, Kimberly Henrie, and I'm here with Matt Brzovic. You're a local wine expert with over a decade of experience. And today we're talking with Matt about sulfites in wine, how much is in a glass, and how they can affect you. Matt, great to be talking with you today as always.
And you as well.
We've had some really great discussions. I'm learning so much. I'm already looking at the different wines that I'm going to start aging from our last conversation. I'm looking forward to being, like half the expert that you are.
Well, as you know, I don't like the word expert, but it's experience. I'm experienced.
The experience is good, generally speaking, right? All right. So today we're going to talk about sulfites found in wine. Can you start us off by telling us what are sulfites? And it's one of those words we all maybe have heard but don't really quite understand. And then why are they used in winemaking?
Well, sulfites, sometimes called anion of sulfur or more commonly SO2, is used in wine as a preservative. It's something that they put in there mostly to keep the wine from oxidizing or spoiling on the way to market. It also occurs naturally in the wine. So when yeast eats sugar to create alcohol in the fermentation process, the byproduct is SO2. So every wine is going to have some naturally occurring in it. It can also pull it from the ground as well in trace amounts. And usually sulfites get blamed for most of the headaches and problems that people have with drinking wine. But I would venture to say that most of the wines today, most of the better wines today have a minute amount of sulfite in them or sulfur used. You used to be able to get a wine, say, 20 years ago that would come from wherever. You'd open it up and it would smell like somebody just lit a match. They were using so much sulfur to preserve it that it was ruining the wine. And because people are sensitive to it, they know that consumers are worried about this. You'll find that most of the wines that we have today have considerably less sulfur used in them than they were in the past.
So just to recap, you're saying that sulfites get the blame sometimes for the headaches that some people have from drinking wine.
They do. They quite often are blamed as the culprit, but there can be a number of other reasons that you can react to a wine. For example, grape skins are high in histamine, and a lot of people that take antihistamines for hay fever, things like that, they end up having reactions. Not all of them, but many of them do, and that would be the reason why, that histamine in the grape. I know some people who have that problem who take an antihistamine before they drink a wine. So there are ways to mitigate that, but that's one of the reasons. Another one can be an allergy to tannin or alcohol and not being aware of it. But lastly, and I think the most important one, is the fact that, wine is a collection of chemical compounds, and it's an organic product that's grown out of the ground. And these beautiful smells that we get out of the wines, like you'll notice some wines that have a mocha or espresso note. That's not coming from the winemaker adding that to it. It's those chemical compounds that are combining to create those smells that are released when oxygen hits the glass. And if you look at it, our bodies, our physiology is all completely different. I kind of look back to one of my favorite comedians, George Carlin, who claimed that his immune system was so strong because he spent his youth swimming in the Hudson River. So many wines probably wouldn't affect George, where somebody who led a much more sheltered life wasn't exposed to as many things. By contrast, maybe we'll have a lot of wines that'll actually affect them. So I think our own physiology has a lot to do with it. But there's no doubt if a wine has too much sulfite used in it, you will get probably a reaction from it.
Okay. Can sulfite in wine be avoided?
Sulfite in wine basically can't be avoided. Now, there are some wines that do make a sulfite-free wine. For example, the reason I say this is there's a wine in our market right now. It's called the Daily Red. Inexpensive, $15.99, but it's gluten-free, it's vegan-friendly, and USDA certified organic. no detectable sulfites. None were added in the process. And this is the whole goal of this wine, is to give people an alternative that has no sulfites added to it. If there are any in there, it would be the minute trace amount that was when the wine was created. And they've even tried to keep that down to a minimum. So what I look at for this wine is, if you really think that sulfites are your problem, go out and grab a bottle of the Daily Red, try it. And if you get a reaction from that wine, it's not the sulfites that are giving you the problem.
Okay, great tip. So it may just be one of those other causes that you talked about. That's a great way to narrow it down.
Exactly. Now, that's not going to take the place of actually going and getting your doctor to test you for allergies and find out if you actually do have a sulfite allergy. But this would be a good way just to try it and see. If there's no reaction, likely it's not the sulfites that are giving you the headache.
Okay. Well, I'd like to explore with you what types of wines have fewer sulfites and, some different alternatives. We'll be talking about that in just a few moments, right after we take a quick break. I'm here with Matt Brzovic.
More From the Vine to the Wine with Matt Brzovic after this.
If you're struggling with a dental or oral health issue, be sure to catch the Healthy Smiles Oral Health Show with Dr. Norm Ickert on the Health Channel on localwebradio.fm.
Shopping for the lowest mortgage rate? Looking to refinance? Catch the Mortgage Newscast with Jared Dreyer on the Business Channel on localwebradio.fm.
Hillcrest Bakery and Deli presents Old Time Radio on the Specialty Channel on localwebradio.fm.
Now, back to From the Vine to the Wine with Matt Brzovic.
And we're back with wine expert Matt Brzovic. Matt, what types of wines tend to have fewer sulfites?
Well, organic wines are always a good place to start, because all of these wines are made with the thought in mind to make them as organic, as clean as possible, to give the consumer something that has fewer sulfites. So I would say organic wines is a great place to start. But you've got a number of places in the world that make almost sulfite-free wines. One of the places would be Beaujolais. Most of the wines there are very minimal sulfite. They're beautiful wines, extremely well made. You can look to Chile and Argentina as well as having more sulfite-free wines. Well, I shouldn't say sulfite-free, but more organic wines in our market than any other two countries. And I used to get a lot of people that would come in and say, oh, I can't drink Chile. It gives me a headache. Well, 15, 20 years ago, that was probably a valid thing to say. At this point, Chile and Argentina, blessed with beautiful, beautiful terroir and sunshine and all the things that you need to make great wine, they have a little less problem with some of the bugs that some of the rest of the places in the world do. They don't have to spray as much. They end up coming up with more organic wines than anybody else. Also, the wines in Chile and Argentina are so much better because they've had more money invested in those two countries in improving and updating the winemaking facilities. So as a result, you get much cleaner wine. And I would also say, though, that there's a better way to look at it, and that would be that, many customers come to me and ask me, well, Matt, I want to drink cleaner wine. What do I need to do? And they expect when I start talking to them, I'm going to say, well, buy more expensive wine. That's not really what you have to do. What you want to do is start looking for wines that come from a very specific place rather than a large area. Stay away from companies that buy their grapes from all over a country or an area. They don't have as much control over what those grapes are. Mm-hmm. So, for example, if we take a wine from Australia and you look on the back of the bottle and it says South Australia, that means that those grapes could come from anywhere in Australia, in South Australia. If the wine says Barossa, all the grapes have to come from Barossa. Now we're getting to a much smaller area. And finally, if it says it comes from a single vineyard in Barossa, now it's a very small area. And when you get to those kind of wines, these are treated like they're little children. This is their whole year wrapped up in these grapes, and it's the premium product they have. That most of them try to do is as gentle a winemaking process as they can, and as a result, you get very little sulfur added at any stage during the process. But you need to do a little research. You have to read the back of that bottle to kind of find out which of these wines are going to be the best ones for you. Large conglomerates, stay away from them. Single vineyard, that's the one you want to drink.
Does it make a difference if it's local or across the globe?
Not necessarily. Locally, it would help if you know the winemaker. You can go see them and talk to them and find out how they're doing it. You take a look across British Columbia, and there's a wide variety of winemaking styles, some who use very little, some who use more. But the only way you're going to find that out is to actually talk to them. Now, wine that comes from the other side of the world, a little bit harder. You can still look things up on their websites and things like that. But if it's a single vineyard on the other side of the world or a very small appellation coming from a very specific place from a producer you know and trust, then that's a much better wine than the wine coming from a large swath of California, let's say, so it's more about specific place, getting a wine that comes from one particular place and from a good producer as well.
Okay, so do your homework is what I'm hearing you say.
A little bit, yeah.
Do your homework. So along those lines, if I've done my homework and I'm just not satisfied with what I'm finding, or I don't want to do the homework, can I just switch to beer or cider to avoid sulfites?
Well, unfortunately, no. The sulfites and sulfur is found in beer, in cider, and it's commonly used in so many places that we don't even realize. Salad bars, you go to a salad bar and have a plate of salad, you're getting the equivalent sulfites to maybe 15 bottles of wine. But nobody talks about, gee, that salad gave me a headache. Lunch meat, any kind of processed foods. There's so many places in our life where sulfur is used for many different things. One of them, and the most important one, usually being a preservative. So yeah, it's not going to help you to switch.
So sulfites are kind of everywhere, it sounds like.
They are, and what you're trying to do is drink better wine to minimize the impact that's going to have on you.
Okay. Wonderful. Very, very informative discussion on, of all things, sulfites when it comes to wine. That's fantastic. Now, you always have some great recommendations for us. What are the wines of the week this week?
So this week, as we were talking about, Beaujolais is a wonderful place to drink very low sulfite wines. And one of the wines that I've picked this week is made by a gentleman named Jean-Paul Brun. He's known as the Duke of Beaujolais. And he comes from the wine is made in a little village called Charmey in the southern Beaujolais region. It's just north of Lyon. It's a beautiful area. The region, it's called the region of Golden Stones. The houses that are made there actually have these beautiful rocks that when the sun shines on them, it looks like gold. So you're walking down the streets of what looks like golden houses. Very beautiful place. But the wine itself is made much like in a Burgundian style. They don't do the usual carbonic maceration process, which is done in Burgundy, which has a sulfur component. They don't do that here. They also no carbonic maceration, and it's natural yeast, not a commercial yeast that's used. A very gentle process for making the wines, which ends up giving you actually a very complex wine for Beaujolais. Now, Beaujolais gets talked about as a very simple, fruity style wine. I would argue as you start going up in price in Beaujolais, this one at $24.99, outstanding wine that has a lot of depth to it. It's not light, wimpy, and fruity. It has beautiful, again, red cherries, very little oak, grown on a limestone soil, so you get a little bit of minerality in the wine as well. And it has the ability to age for, probably 2 to 3 years, that kind of thing. But very low sulfur and good wine for somebody to try that's looking to try and get sulfur out of their wines. Wine number 2 is Emiliano's Coyam, which is from the Colchaga Valley in Chile. This wine is $29.99, and it's a blend of 38% Syrah, 27% Carmenere, 12% Cab, and 1% each of Mourvedre and Petit Verdot. This wine not only is organic, but it's biodynamic as well. Everything about this wine is the kind of thing that I would send a consumer to that is looking for low sulfite. They've been written up now in the Wine Spectator for 7 straight years. The new vintage just got 91 points. This is one of the premier wines coming out of Chile, and it just happens to be organic and biodynamic too. It's a big, powerful, full-bodied wine that in fact has the stuffing to probably last 6 or 7 years. Lots of dark grapefruit mixed with red. There's a little mocha note coming through it, a little blueberry too from the Carmenere. This is just a wine that impresses people every time they try it. The finish is beautiful and smooth, just gorgeous for $30, and a little step up, but this is the kind of wine that if you're having problems with sulfites, this wine, I don't think, if they've used any, you can never tell in this wine. It's so beautifully made.
Wonderful recommendations. And you also mentioned earlier Our Daily Red.
Yes, Our Daily Red at $15.99. Just a great wine that, like I say, has no detectable sulfites whatsoever. Everything about it was made to be sulfite-free and give the consumer that option. So at $15.99, I think it's a good little wine for people to try to see if sulfites are actually causing their problems.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Matt. I enjoy hearing your insight into sulfites and the chemistry of wine and how it all comes together. And, of course, appreciate, as always, your Wines of the Week recommendations. I'm sure folks will enjoy the blends that you suggested today. If you have questions, comments, or would like some recommendations from Matt, you can find him on Twitter at Vine to the Wine. And if you've enjoyed what you've learned here today, we also invite you to subscribe by clicking on the subscribe link in the show notes. Matt, again, thanks so much.
My pleasure as always, Kimberly.
You've been listening to From the Vine to the Wine with Matt Brzovic on the Lifestyle Channel on localwebradio.fm.
Local stories, local voices. We're localwebradio.fm.
This episode is a production of Jam Media. For information on hosting your own web radio show, visit jammedia.com. That's www.jambmedia.com.
The opinions expressed by our guest and host on localwebradio.fm do not necessarily reflect the views of Jam Media or its owners. No expressed or implied opinions of any product or service should be considered an endorsement or recommendation of any kind by Jam Media or its owners.